Hey everybody, this is Chris Thompson, and welcome to session number 36 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. He owns an exact copy of Frodo's sword Sting, loves wine gums, and has hypnotized more people than you've had hot dinners. Please welcome to the studio, Dr. Mike Mandel.
Yes, Chris, I'm here again, broadcasting, podcasting to the planet from the very epicenter of global hypnosis, Toronto, Canada. We got an email the other day from Rebecca in Brooklyn, and she asked, Dear Mike and Chris, why do you call it the epicenter of hypnosis? Because epicenter means around the center. Why aren't you calling it the center of world hypnosis? Because to us, the center of global, world, massive, this planet hypnosis is St. Michael's College at the University of Toronto, where we run our 5-day Architecture of Hypnosis course. Therefore, Toronto, Canada is the epicenter. It's everything surrounding that. Chris, over to you.
Well, by that definition, I think the center moves wherever you go.
Thanks, man. Okay, I'm the center.
Oh, that was just hilarious. All right,
brilliant.
Let's very quickly remind people. First of all, before I remind anybody of anything, I'm going to tell you what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about the secrets of peak performance. So we had a couple of podcasts going through memory techniques, and Mike spilled his guts on a lot of the stuff that's on the Memory Power CD. People really enjoyed those two podcasts. And so we thought we'd follow that up, talk a little bit more about peak performance skills, which is another one of the CDs that we have available on the website. But the podcasts are free, and we like to give you guys really awesome material. So Mike's going to teach you some cool stuff. We'll talk about how to deepen trance, and if we have time, we'll get to some of the crazy stories from Mike's life on the road as a hypnotist.
Oh, yes.
And then we'll do a little bit of Q&A. Now, before
we have a horrendously entertaining closing metaphor, the dressmaker's dummy, which is a very interesting story.
We've done so many podcasts now, it's like a little bit of work, just a little bit, to come up with endings and metaphors, which is always fun. Right?
Just letting the silence hang there? Okay. And we should put cricket sounds at that moment. Would be absolutely fantastic.
I was wondering if you were just messing with me, if you were going to tell me, hey, stop.
Now, back up for a second, Chris, just because you did mention about the memory power stuff that we were teaching in the last couple of podcasts, showing people how to enhance your memory, how to work better with your memory. There are no bad memories. There's only untrained memory. There's only people who don't pay attention to memorize things in the first place.
I thought you were going to say there's not bad memory. There's only bad people.
I knew you were going to say that. So anyway, if you've learned those techniques, if you listen to the previous podcast where we did discuss memory, use the techniques. Learn that phonetic alphabet. It will serve you very, very well, and you'll find it extremely useful. Apply this stuff. Chris and I are always thrilled when we get emails from, lots and lots of people email us, but the best emails are when people say, hey, I applied such and such, and it really worked. It was awesome.
Yeah, we get a lot of those emails on all kinds of different topics, and it's just fantastic. Okay, let's talk about the July 8th to 12th Architecture of Hypnosis
Quick
class.
Commercial.
Quick reminder, 5-day intensive. As of the date that we are recording this right now, there are 11 seats left. There is likely to be fewer than that by the time this podcast goes live. And, of course, less time left to sign up. So check it out, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class, and
this is going to be fabulous, Chris. We're doing Monday to Friday. People can fly in one weekend, leave on the other weekend, hang around Toronto, which is a great city.
Especially in July. It's
beautiful and warm, and there's a lot on the go, a lot of great things to do, great culture and art and music and clubbing, whatever you want to do. We got great restaurants, 5th largest city in North America. And come and check it out, because this course is going to be an absolute blast. We have people coming from Czech Republic, from England, I think the U.S. again. So come on out and study with us. You're going to love it, which brings us to September.
Yeah, so I still have not put up any kind of sign-up page for this, and I'm building an early bird mailing list. But September 7th, which is a Saturday here in Toronto, it's a Saturday everywhere, but it's also a Saturday here in Toronto when we're running a class on, Mike is running a class on handwriting analysis, something that people have been literally begging for. We have gotten so many emails asking, when are you doing the first, because we always talk a little bit about this in the hypnosis class, and then people want a full course on it, handwriting analysis. send me an email, info@mikemandelhypnosis.com, and just say I'm interested in the early bird sign-up list.
We'll keep you in the loop. And this is going to be phenomenal. I practiced it forensically when I worked with the police charter. I've done it for numerous police services, worked on all kinds of cases where we, including a poisoning case where we use the handwriting as part of it. And this will teach you both European and American methods. We put the two kinds of graphology together. I've been doing this for 20-odd years and find it phenomenal. If you want to know what your friends and family are really like, the writing never lies.
Now, I may have a sign-up page available by the time this podcast goes live, but just given how much work we're putting into the online hypnosis class that we are about to launch, I doubt I'll get to it in the next 3 weeks. We have tons of work to do. All right.
So having said all that,
let's get on with it. So let's talk about peak performance.
Peak performance. Yeah, being at your best in any situation you need to be. And we've all had those times when we are in the zone and everything is just working. It's just clicking. In fact, I'm having one of those mornings today. Having cut the wheat out of my diet, I'm feeling much, much better today. It's strange how it seems to affect me in a negative way. But yeah, I'm in the zone, and peak performance is something we can all aspire to, and we can all hit more often, whether we are endeavoring to deliver a presentation to a group, or we're swimming against the clock, or working in gymnastics, or creating new products. Whatever it is, we all need to be in the zone.
So let's talk about that. What does it mean to be in the zone?
Well, ideally, Chris, it means, to me at least, having all of our resources online, up and running, and available when we need them. So we're not hunting around to try to get into the right sort of state. And we have all had the occasions when we know things have worked, things have clicked, and there will always be a physiological aspect to this as well as a mental one.
So this might be a good time to talk about the Grinder model.
Well, yes. In fact, this is one of the best ways of looking at it. As you know, Chris, this morning I did a podcast for someone else, for Matt Coast. He was in Thailand, and we did a podcast. He was asking me all about peak performance, and that was this morning. So that's why we sort of mapped across to continue talking about this. He was asking me how NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, addresses the whole issue of peak performance. And I said, well, there are essentially two main schools of NLP, although there's people teaching black swan theory and the so-called wisdom of crowds, which is also known as mob rule and lynch mobs. And they're calling all sorts of things NLP that are not. In original or classical NLP, which was the Mandel and Grinder model going back to the 1970s, in order to gain access to a resource state, you would go into the person's personal history through some sort of protocol procedure, put down a dipper that would drag and dredge out that state they were looking for, because it is axiomatic to neurolinguistic programming that any resource you've ever had, even for 1 second, you still have it. Your brain knows how to do it again. Riding a bike, of course, is a perfect example of this. It doesn't matter if you haven't ridden one in 50 years. You get on one and you ride it perfectly.
And maybe more practically for people who are interested in public speaking and being excellent at that, if you've ever delivered a great presentation to a small group of people, a large group of people, or your teacher, or made a very convincing argument to your parents, you had that resource at the time, and
right.
You always have access to it. You just have to know how to bring it back up.
You always have access, and there's many ways of approaching it. And let's just do a little side issue, and I'll bring this back on to the center again. But that's a good point, Chris. I worked with a number of people who had to make presentations who did not want to do it at all, and found it nerve-wracking, terrifying, whatever. Remember, public speaking is a greater fear than death for most people. And one man said, I can't speak in front of people. I said, what happens? He said, I get tongue-tied and nervous, and I sweat and I panic. And I said, how many people do you have to speak in front of me? He said, about 15 or 20 at work next week. And I said, well, what do you mean you can't speak in front of people? He said, I can't at all. I said, but do you know these people? He said, well, most of them. I said, can you speak in front of your family? He said, well, of course I can. I said, oh, so you can speak in front of people without a problem.
Nice reframe.
And he went, yeah. I said, so you have the resource you need, you just don't have it in the context of this other group. And then he began to have hope and recognize that, yes, he could speak in front of people, just certain people.
It's context reframe.
Context reframe. And I worked with him to shift it so he then had the resources in the other context. And there's numerous ways of doing that. So back to center again, where we were in the stream. Classical NLP, you send the dipper down, you grab the resource you need, but it comes up with all the junk attached to it of the context when this happened. And so when you bring it back and install it in the present or for some future event, whatever, you are bringing all these artifacts with it, the context and a number of other things connected to it. So New Code NLP, which is John Grinder's, I like to think, improvement to classical NLP, although there's still a lot of great stuff in classical NLP, although things like the swish pattern, which work about 60% of the time, are largely archaic now. New Code NLP works with a different idea. So instead of going back into the past with this dipper, it presupposes that in order for your performance to be good in any task, you have to be in a specific or powerful state. Now, we intuitively know what we mean by state. It's in our language. Oh, he got himself in a terrible state. Oh, did you see the state of that room? Mm-hmm. We know what it means.
And we usually label them with nominalizations.
Right.
Like depression, and anxiety,
yes.
and excitement.
Whatever they are, yes, which are all nominalizations you cannot put in a wheelbarrow. Same with all nominalizations. So you have to change the state in order to change or improve the performance. If you put yourself in a nasty, depressed, unresourceful state, your performance will sink and crash and burn. So we know the state is the sum total of all the internal processes, including internal dialogue and everything that's currently going on in your neurology and psychology. And above state, though, is your physiology. What is your physical body doing? You see, if you change the physiology, you change the state. And as soon as you change the state, you then change the performance.
If anyone has ever watched Tony Robbins, I mean, this is kind of a main staple of his presentation, right?
Oh, absolutely.
How you stand, how you breathe, how you hold your body, how you speak, the tone of voice you use,
how you
the
move,
excitement that you convey in your audio delivery.
Right. Emotion follows motion. So if you want to feel more powerful, you're not going to sit there and tell yourself, I'm powerful. I'm a strong and powerful human being.
I'm going to try
I'm
really
able
hard.
to do this. I'll try really hard to deal with this problem. I'm going to do a great job next week. Meanwhile, your unconscious is going, wrong, not going to happen. Don't believe you.
Yeah.
So when you move your physical body, how would you stand if you were congruent? Who could you model?
I was just going to say that, because if you are having a hard time dipping back into that past and pulling out a resource, for whatever reason, you can't unconsciously, in trance, you'd be able to pull out a resourceful state from your past. But if you couldn't do it consciously,
you don't even need to do it. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, you could just pretend.
The as if. Yeah. If I was Tony Robbins, how would I stand? How would I move? How would I talk? If I was, pick a powerful person of your choice. It doesn't matter.
It can be somebody that you actually know who
could be someone from
that.
fiction.
Or
it doesn't matter.
Or you just make it up. If I could be a different me, what would I want to be like?
Right, and certainly not Hitler or, Charles Manson or something, but we pick someone who is a good model. Mm-hmm. How do they move? How do they stand? How do they talk? How do they shift their body weight? How do they gesture? And if you move rapidly and gesture rapidly and you're congruent and impassioned in your speech, you will take that on and it will change your state and it will then affect your performance in a positive direction.
Quick segue.
Go ahead.
Very interested in your opinion on this. So I watch children a lot, and they're make-believing, and they're pretending that they are, characters, and they're so congruent. And I think that's fantastic because they are building in all of these resources to be available to them in the future, are they not?
Right. Well, you've got little kids. How do they pretend, Chris? Do they think about things a little bit, or do they take it on completely?
Oh, 100%, 110%. If my kids are playing My Little Pony, or if they're playing whatever it is that they're playing, they are acting it out fully. They are breathing, they are moving, they're speaking as if, I'm the teacher now, and I'm going to teach you whatever the lesson is that they're teaching to each other. It's hilarious, but I think it's so useful to them as well in their development.
Of course it is, because kids have no problem with let's pretend.
Mm-hmm.
They have no problem. And let's pretend is the as-if frame. Now, the interesting thing is, if you pretend something congruently enough, it will start to occur in your life. If you act like a really confident, assertive person and do it continuously, it becomes your normal behavior after a while. And guess what? You become an assertive, congruent person. It's just what happens.
So one thing that people can take away is whatever attribute that you want to have, just pretend you have it and act as if you have it, and guess what happens?
I put the crickets there, Chris, like it was completely blank and meaningless and nobody was listening?
Yeah, but I can do that in the editing software.
I just did it based on what you're saying. Like you tell a joke and you say make some comment and it's just a no response.
I was watching you,
wondering what I'm doing with the iPhone 5.
And I see these sound. I go, I know what he's going to do.
Did you know it's going to be the crickets?
Yes,
of course you did. But so now we're back to you want to change performance, you change state. You improve state for improved performance. You collapse state if you want a crap performance. If you move your physical body vigorously and congruently and stand tall and so on, you will change your state, and that'll change your performance. But at the top of the Grinder model, and I love this because it's only 4 things.
Breathing.
At the top is breathing. Now, in all kinds of different disciplines throughout history, breathing has been essential. Chanting, breathing is important. Physical fitness. We talk about deep breathing as part of it. We're doing things like Hindu squats. It actually stokes your entire physical body by changing your breathing. Yoga, Qigong, martial arts. When you change the breathing, you change the physiology, you change the blood chemistry, you change the performance by working through the state. It all falls into place because breathing is at the higher end of the hierarchy. Now, if you change just that, it'll shift everything else. And I recommend something called the 7-11 breathing or the 7-12 breathing, depending on who you're talking to. Every time you breathe in, your sympathetic nervous system switches on. Now, this is, say you have a resting heart rate of 64 beats per minute. Your heart rate isn't 64 for the entire minute. Every time you breathe in, your heart accelerates. And then your vagus nerve fires in your neck. When it does, and you begin to exhale, then your parasympathetic nervous system switches on, and your body begins to cause the blood pressure to drop and your heart slows down. So your breathing is always a balance, like a seesaw, a teeter-totter between breathing in, breathing out. It takes longer to exhale than to inhale. So if you breathe in for a count of, say, 7, and you breathe out for a count of, say, 11, you're giving more time to the parasympathetic nervous system and enabling your blood pressure to drop and your heart to slow. And you'll be in a very calm, resourceful state when you do this. And by changing your breathing, once again, you're changing your physiology. Automatically, your state and your performance will soar.
Okay, I want to come back to that in a second, and I want to ask you for some specific instructions that people could do to manufacture whatever state that they want. But when we were talking about this, I was just thinking, there's a lot of rituals people will go through to enter peak states. They will listen to a song. You'll see an Olympic swimmer. I love watching Olympic swimming. And they'll put their iPod in their ears and they're listening to some music that psychs them up. Or a fighter will come into the octagon with his, the Gracie chain. There's all kinds of rituals people go through and they get into these peak states, right? And you'll never hear a scientist challenge that these rituals, these psyching yourself up will be effective. But you'll see scientists look at NLP and say, "Oh, well, it isn't proven.
Yeah,
It's not a science."
Not
like,
it's just a model.
Cares?
It's just a model. I read online one hypnotist is now, basically saying he's completely done away with NLP as irrelevant and it doesn't work. Well, I guess I'll go back to the hundreds and hundreds of people I've helped with NLP techniques and tell them it didn't really help them.
Sorry, guys, you were all tricked. Why do people go through these rituals? Because they already know it works. And when you break it down and when you realize that NLP, at least one of the basics of NLP, is modeling what works. So
right. Now, remember, these rituals, whatever it is, and an example I saw many years ago when the Toronto Blue Jays were World Series champions in baseball, I saw Dave Winfield, who is one of my favorites, and what he used to do is when he'd go up to bat, he would fire his anchors. That's what's happening with these rituals we're doing.
Anchors.
They're firing anchors to put us into specific states. So he's up there, and he's got the bat, and he would tap each foot with the bat and then step up to the plate. And whatever it is, they re-anchor themselves to fire those peak performance states.
Where's the cricket sound?
There it is.
That's awesome. I just lost my train of thought, so I thought that would be a great thing to insert.
Wide awake now.
Okay, so
I haven't said that in a long time. Wide awake now.
Okay, so the thing we were going to come back to. So breathing in the method that you just described. So what exactly would you tell somebody to do if that? Let's say they wanted to go into peak state for an athletic event.
Okay, let's make it something other than athletics, just to make it really easy. One of the things that John Grinder taught me, which I love, is walking with grace and power. Now, the whole idea with this is you're shifting the breathing and the physiology, and you're getting a more powerful state, which then changes performance. And a classic example of this is you take something, let's say, let's say that you're an actor and you have to do a performance on stage in a theater group and you're nervous about it. So what you do is get a nice area where you can walk, or I've done this with an actor. In fact, you get an area of maybe 20 feet. It was in a gymnasium at a martial arts school, and you place something on the ground to act as a spot. So a hula hoop or a plastic hoop they use in gymnastics, or a circular mat, anything that is noticeable on the ground.
Like a zone.
A zone. And this will be at the far end of the area they're walking, or almost at the far end. I'd have him, first of all, stand inside this zone and experience all the feelings, everything you would see, everything you would hear from the problematic state. What do you see when you think of this, having to do the play? Oh, I see it all falling apart. I see this. I see the audience looking disappointed. Whatever it is, what do you hear? And you go through them one at a time. Oh, I hear as I'm standing in that state, and you're building it with more and more complexity. Oh, I hear the audience hardly applauding at all, whatever it is.
Now, key point, you're not seeding these negative thoughts.
No, I'm asking him.
You're just asking.
Or her, what do you see, what do you hear, and what do you feel in those states? Letting him present it. In fact, that's a very good point, Chris.
Yeah, you're not saying, how awful do you feel standing there right now?
How awful can you possibly feel, and how can it totally sabotage you for the rest of your life?
Unlike EFT, you're not looking to bring the subjective units of distress up to 10.
Correct. Okay, so we have the person, everything they see, everything they hear, everything they feel. Now, I have him step abruptly out of this hula hoop, normally stepping backwards out of this zone.
Breaking state,
and imagining, pretending that he leaves all of that junk, all the garbage inside that zone on the ground. It's easy to do. Just pretend it works and then pretend you're not pretending. The mind can work that quickly. So he steps out. Now I'll get him walking up and down. We are now going to build a high-performance state. So I'll have him walk, and I will suggest different ways he can improve the quality of the walk. And if he likes them, he will adopt them. Swing your arms. If that makes you feel better, keep doing that. Gently turn your head from side to side. Look around.
Implement the breathing.
Breathe deeply through your nose. Look around. Put a smile on your face. Relax your shoulders. Stand taller.
Here's some music in your mind.
Hear music in your mind. Whatever it is, and I'm changing the quality of the walk and adding the breathing for sure, Chris, as you just said. So when I've got him walking up and down in this powerful state, I say, when it's at its peak, I want you to imagine everything you saw still inside that zone and walk through it in this powerful state and just blow it all to bits. So he walks through it a couple of times, destroying everything he saw, all the images just blowing apart. Then he continues walking in this powerful state and walks through the zone again. Everything he heard, all the sounds and everything of the lack of applause or disappointed audience moaning, whatever it is, blows them all apart. And finally, he walks through it and blows apart all the bad feelings, everything he felt. Now, the key is when you walk through it, don't look down at the zone. You don't want to take it on. Keep your eyes straight ahead or up slightly and just do it by your peripheral vision. Walk through it, destroy everything bad that you felt. When it's all gone, now step into the zone, breathe deeply, feel strong with all of it gone. Then you're going to future pace. You're going to rehearse what it will be like in the future. So I said, now imagine you're going to go and speak, or you're going to go and do that stage performance. How do you feel now in the future walking on that stage? Feel this state. So he goes, yeah, it feels great. Fine, the work is done. When he goes on stage, that state will fire automatically now. He won't have to do anything. He doesn't have to psych himself up. We have created, instead of putting the dipper down and dragging all the junk from the past, we've created a brand new high-performance state. Put it in the context where it's needed, and it will fire on its own.
Okay, so let's break this down really quickly again. So the first thing you're doing is you're putting them in the zone. You're eliciting their state by asking questions using
what did you see?
Meta model type questions.
What do you hear? What do you feel? Or what are you telling yourself internally? Get that kind of questions.
Then you're stepping out of the zone to break state.
Stepping out, breaking state, and leaving all the bad stuff there intentionally.
Then you're doing walking with grace and power and building up the positive, resourceful
Changing
state.
the quality of the walk and building the positive resource state, the high-performance state. When it is at its peak,
you
then
start walking through, not stopping in the zone.
No.
You blast right through it.
Some people have said they actually feel it tug at them as they go through it, the old state trying to get control. But you blast through it with power. You don't look down at it, and you hit every component individually. Everything you saw, everything you heard, everything you felt, everything negative you told yourself. You can add that as well if you like. Then when you're super powerful, you can stop in it and feel all the new state in its place. Imagine being there in the future.
Future
with
pacing.
all the new state, which is rehearsing it and re-scripting for the future pacing it, and bingo, you're off and running. Now let's add one more thing to this, Chris.
Sure.
Another way you can use this, I don't know how we're doing for time here, but another way you can use this that's very powerful. Let's say you've got a business meeting and you've been using Walking with Grace and Power. This is called a personal edit.
Oh, I know where you're
So
going with this.
you walk to the meeting in that state. Get out of your car 2 blocks early, park 2 blocks away from the meeting, and walk with grace and power, swinging your arms, breathing. Get yourself in the zone before you get there and show up in your high-performance state.
You create your zone in the place where the meeting is going to be.
Yeah, and you bring it with you. So you're creating it en route by walking. Put yourself in the zone. You'll do it really, really quickly. I can do it so fast now, Chris. I remember being backstage at, it was, I think, the biggest bar in North America, Lulu's. I was doing a show there. And I had a huge turnout, and I was walking backstage, and I said, walking with grace and power. And that's my anchor to start doing it. I walked up and down for maybe a minute, not even 30 seconds, got totally in the zone and just exploded onto the stage like AC/DC.
That's awesome. And I suppose if you were, let's say, working out of a home office or a cubicle and you had to have a phone meeting with somebody and you were nervous about it, you could do this in advance and anchor that peak state to your desk where your phone is.
Yes, or you can sit there and just do the breathing shift. Do the breathing shift and feel powerful, and then add a bit of motion in your cubicle. You can certainly still do it.
That's awesome. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left, but we have to cover metaphors and all that. So do you want to tell maybe a story or two from the road as a traveling hypnotist?
Oh, gee. Well, I've been on the road since 1975, and I don't do as many shows as I used to, but it used to be crazy. One of the guys I worked with was from Britain, and he used to speak backwards, phonetically perfectly. And we traveled in my Z28 with this big TIAC reel-to-reel tape recorder that was huge and packed in a crate. And somebody in the audience would give a phrase for him to say backwards. So they would say something like, "The hypnotist has arrived in the building." And he had this TIAC recorder rigged so it would play either direction. So he'd record it and say, and everybody would be laughing, and then he'd click
You do
reverse.
that remarkably well.
Well, I heard him do it for years. He'd press reverse, and it would come out. I mean, it was just hilarious. And he was really good at this. But we got into some interesting situations. He was another Brit, but he was a dead soft Southerner, not from the north like I am, lad. And he was in Germany working with a band on a sound crew, a girl band years ago. And a guy was irritating and annoying one of the girls in the band and blew smoke in her face and that. So he just got mad and he wrapped his arm around the guy's neck, tried to put a headlock on him. But what happened was the man went unconscious, went limp, and he let him go and he just bounced and fell onto the floor. And he said to me, "I don't know what happened." I said, "Well, I do." I said, "I teach this to the cops. You did an LVNR. It's a lateral vascular neck restraint, or what we call a blood choke. There's 2 kinds of choke. You can shut off the air by compressing the trachea, which is very painful, or you can shut off the blood flow to the brain through the carotid sinus, which isn't painful. You don't even have to do it hard. And the danger of being in that is you don't know you're in danger because you're just suddenly unconscious. 8 to 13 seconds, you can be out for 30 seconds or more. So he had done this by accident. And he said, "Oh, it was great. I didn't hurt my hands," because he's normally punching guys in the head. And I said, "No, here's how you do it." And I showed him how to do a shoulder spin blood choke, which you know, Chris, being one of my instructors I trained. So I spin him around. He puts the blood choke on. So he went crazy with this thing. I created a monster. He was in a Tim Hortons donut shop with our other friend Grant, who moved to San Francisco. They're standing in line. Some guy started mouthing off at them. They got into it, and he spun the guy, threw the blood choke on, and he was out in 8 seconds. So it just went on and on and on. And the culmination was Niagara College in Welland, Ontario. And we were doing a nighttime show, and it was a bunch of weird drunks in the crowd, and security was not dealing with them. And Bob had a thing where he would memorize a 30-digit number, having heard it once, and then he'd have it covered on the blackboard. He'd do the backward talking and stuff, and then it would be uncovered, and he'd say it backwards from memory, which is a pretty cool trick. And anybody who listened to the last podcast on memory can easily learn to do this in an evening. It's not hard, but it's very impressive. Well, this idiot in the audience was yelling the numbers before he got to them, just deliberately undoing the effect. And security's just looking at the guy like, oh, this is totally normal to have someone ruin a show.
Yeah.
So I just blew up because this is about 1981. I was a much younger man and much more, let's say, out of control than I am with the maturity that one has at my advanced age. And I just jumped off the stage and I went wading out into the audience, freaking out on people. I was kicking chairs and tables out of the way and everyone was frantically trying to get out of my way. I went through the audience like a bull terrier. And as I went through the audience like a bull terrier, I thought it would be entirely appropriate to just add at this moment the bull terrier bark. That's my dog Lockjaw. So Bob suddenly realizes he's on stage alone, which was his worst nightmare. And so he runs back to the dressing room. There's a reporter there to interview us, and she said, oh, it was terrible how they treated you guys. It was a nightmare. I said, yeah, I don't know what the guy's problem was. As I'm saying this, I look over Bob's shoulder, and this jerk has come to the dressing room now and is now yelling at us through the dressing room window.
Oh, man.
And Bob jumps up, runs out, and by the time I got in the hall, this man was already unconscious. He'd done a shoulder spin blood choke on him. They took him out of Niagara College in an ambulance, and the rest is just for the history books.
Oh, these days, Bob would go to jail for that.
Oh, he definitely would. I mean, it's insane, the things of the past of being an entertainer on the road, working with rock bands and stuff. I mean, working with bands that routinely threw pop machines down flights of stairs and hosed each other down with fire extinguishers. The number of fire extinguisher fights we had in my youth, until some guy went to jail out in Western Canada for rendering fire extinguishing equipment, life-saving equipment, inoperative.
Oh, geez.
This guy was a roadie, fires a fire extinguisher, just a minor thing, hoses down the manager of a hotel and goes to prison. Good grief. If we'd ever been caught, I'd still be in jail.
Oh, man. I'm just
kidding, of course, though, in case the police are listening.
Here. The next time we do some of these stories, we're going to make them a little less violent.
Well, you asked a question. It wasn't
I'm just teasing you.
So Bob dealt with a menace.
All right. We're going to have to do some more of these because I think they're funny.
Okay, man. We'll throw in the odd one.
Not today. So let's end with the... Oh, we have to do the question. This one came in a little while ago, and I promised Ned that we would answer it on a podcast. So Ned from Bulgaria, he sent in a question asking for your thoughts, Mike, on brainwave entrainment.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, I remember this question. Brainwave entrainment is something I did mess with a few years ago, back in 1990s with Gary Fu, who was my martial arts master at the time when I was studying Wugar Mosat. And Gary got me into this. Basically, entrainment is when you have a repetitive pulse going into the brain, either through the auditory channel, even the kinesthetic channels, physical motion, or through the visual channel, like flashing lights. Well, we're all aware that these things can have an effect because obviously epileptics have to be very, very careful of lights flashing at certain frequencies, which can trigger grand mal seizures. Well, also, though, if you have lights flashing at a certain rate, sounds pulsing at a certain rate, it creates a trance. It causes a numbing in the brain. The brain begins to resonate and is entrained with that frequency, and you can get all sorts of interesting effects. Gary Fu and I had something called the brain supercharger, which would actually cause an entrainment at a theta wave. So if your waking state is in a beta wave, below that you have high and low alpha, and below that you have theta, which is maybe around 4 to 6 hertz cycles per second, in other words, and it's a very creative wave. And you'd put on these earphones and these glasses that would flash binaurally, both ears, and bioptically at the same time, and the brain would resonate with it, and you'd have really interesting hallucinations and come up with all kinds of ideas without actually sleeping. It's sort of an electronic meditation. Whether it did any real good, I have no idea. It was certainly extremely entertaining. The one thing I did not like with the entrainment was you could set the frequency where you wanted it with these glasses. And the one I tried, and Gary tried it as well, and we did try and never used it again, it was an alpha wave, it was a beta wave, which is a daily waking state. And instead of being relaxing, this 12 to 18 hertz was actually jarring. We both felt like we drank
6 cups of coffee.
Yeah, like on an empty stomach. It was jarring and almost caused an anxiety. So that was sort of my last experiment with brainwave entrainment. Although this has been around for all through history, Chris. I mean, chanting In native cultures, drumming, all of these things cause entrainment.
So fun, but not necessarily useful. So maybe we should call it brainwave entertainment.
Well, that's very good, Chris. That's a very clever line.
All right. I think that about wraps up the amount of time we have for Q&A on this podcast. But let's move into, do you want to do the metaphor first or the empowering question?
Oh, let's do the empowering question. So listen to this carefully, absorb this, let this sink into your unconscious mind. I'm going to say it twice. Your empowering question for today is, who is the most helpful person you know, and who is the most toxic? And what are the implications for your life? Again, who is the most helpful person you know, and who is the most toxic? And what are the implications of this for your life?
Good question. All right, let's move into the closing metaphor. What do you got for us
Closing
today?
metaphor goes back to Chatterton, England, where I was born, which is part of Manchester, Greater Manchester. I always remember there was a woman on our street. This was told to me much later on. A woman on our street whose, I think it was her cousin, had a heart attack and was hospitalized. And her cousin had a cat, a black British short-hair cat with green eyes, and I think its name was Napoleon, if I remember correctly. And so the woman on the street was asked to go and look after this cat for a couple of days until the woman got out of the hospital. It was an indoor cat. And so she traveled to another part of Chatterton. I'm pretty sure it was still there. It wasn't out of town. And this was a nice little house she was staying in, looking after her cousin's belongings and taking care of Napoleon, the cat. Well, as so often happens in these stories, it began to rain. And it turned into a thunderstorm, which happens quite frequently in England. And she heard this scraping sound and thought the cat was trying to get out. And so she went looking for Napoleon, called him, couldn't find him at either of the doors, and eventually found him upstairs at the end of a corridor in this small house where there was a closed door. The cat was scratching at this. Well, the woman, I think her name was something like Mrs. Gloyn, or an odd name, opened the door to let the cat into this room. And her cousin was a seamstress in her spare time. And this was where she had all her seamstress belongings, her sewing machine and fabric and so on. And the cat was trying to get in. But when she opened the door, the lightning flashed, and she saw what she thought was a headless woman across the room. Almost gave her a heart attack, as she told it. Well, it was a dressmaker's dummy. And it was wearing a dress that her cousin had been working on for someone else with all frills and lace, and the stitching was still hanging from this, and it completely freaked her out. So she dragged Napoleon out of the room and shut the door. Went downstairs and made a cup of tea, and the storm got worse. And this kind of put her in a weird state. It was not a high-performance state, it was a bad state. And she thought, this is ridiculous. So she built a little fire. It was a coal fire back then, and sat and read for a while with a cup of tea, which is the English cure for everything, and went to bed. And all was fine. And she was sleeping, though, and her dreams began to get more and more disturbed. She said her dreams were full of pins and needles and feelings like pins and needles, obviously going back to the dressmaker's room, the seamstress room. And she woke up because it was a flash of lightning. And standing next to her bed was the dressmaker's dummy.
Thanks for listening to Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. This has been episode 36. Head on over to iTunes, leave a rating for the show, and write a review for the show. We'd always love to get more written reviews. And if you're interested in the July Architecture of Hypnosis 5-day intensive, make sure to visit MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class. And finally, if you're unable to travel to Toronto, but you would like to learn hypnosis directly from Mike online, we will be launching shortly. Get on our mailing list and you will get notification of when we launch, and it is going to be awesome.
He was a phenomenal president with his black hat and his wife who was a seamstress. and he lived in the White House until they assassinated him. Abraham Lincoln walks at midnight in Springfield, Illinois.
Crazy.